Hi, my name is Eleanor Tatum, and I'm the publisher and editor-in-chief of the New York Amsterdam News. The coronavirus crisis has brought serious distress to local economies and advertising along with them. The New York Amsterdam News has partnered with the Local Media Association during this unprecedented crisis. Help us continue our important work in chronicling the life of Black New Yorkers, and consider making a donation to the COVID-19 Local News Fund today. Go to givebutter.com/Amsterdam News. Again, that is givebutter.com/Amsterdam News. Thank you and stay safe.
It's Thursday, July 9th, and welcome to the New York Amsterdam News Podcast. I'm Cyril Josh Barker. On this week's episode, my guest is anti-violence advocate A.T. Mitchell, who is the founder and executive director of the nonprofit organization Man Up, Inc. He's going to be speaking with me about the recent spike in violence in the city. Well, while the 4th of July weekend was dominated by the sounds of fireworks, the sound of gunshots was also in the atmosphere as the city experienced one of its most violent weekends. The NYPD reported 45 shootings, leaving 64 people wounded and 11 people dead. The violence is a continuation of the rise in shootings that occurred in June. Reports indicate that the city saw a 130% increase in shootings last month compared to June 2019. Among the victims of last weekend's shootings was a 29-year-old man found dead in Lincoln Terrace Park in Brooklyn, a 14-year-old shot in St. Albans, Queens, and a 29-year-old man walking his daughter in the Bronx. Community leaders and politicians are looking for ways to stop the violence and keep the peace in the streets. And we welcome you to this episode of our podcast. And we're so happy to have A.T. Mitchell with us this week to discuss this issue. He was actually on the podcast last year, actually Memorial Day last year, to discuss this same issue about violence in the community that seems to have escalated now. And I'm going to speak with him about what he thinks the root of the problem is. You know, there's a lot of conversation about what the root of these issues are. And I'm also going to ask him about his feelings about the recent cut to funding and reforms to the NYPD. Well, it is Thursday, and the paper did come out today, and I have several stories that I want to go over with you. First, our front page story is about the recent spike in violence in the city, and we talked to Ashley Sharpton, the daughter of the Reverend Al Sharpton, about her thoughts on the issue. Ashley is the director of the National Action Network's Youth Huddle, and she tells us how this is all impacting young people, and you'll be very surprised to know what young people are thinking about this and what they want. We get into that a little further. Also on our front page, we cover the city's efforts to keep COVID-19 cases down as states across the nation see dangerous levels of the virus spreading. We take a closer look at the state's travel advisory and plans ahead as the city enters phase 3 reopenings, which began this week. And finally, in our arts and entertainment section, we cover the COVID-19 emergency grants for performing arts. The arts community has suffered greatly during the COVID-19 pandemic, and since mid-March, all types of live performances have ceased. We give you a list of all of the artist relief funds that are providing emergency grants for people that are in that profession. And you can check out all of these stories and more by picking up the newspaper. All we ask is that you do it safely, pick it up on newsstands, or you can go online to amsterdamnews.com. Well, my guest this week is A.T. Mitchell, who is the founder and executive director of the community-based organization Man Up, Inc. He's with me to discuss the recent spike in shootings in the city, along with his work in the community to stop the violence. Welcome to the podcast, A.T. How are you?
I am fine, Josh. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. Well, we saw some devastating things happen during the 4th of July weekend and even in July when it comes to violence in the city. Give us your take what's going on. Man Up Inc. has always been on the front lines. You've always been on the front lines. You're seeing what's going on. Give me your take of what you're seeing.
Well, I'm seeing the exact results of a combination of like tsunamis that are happening all at once. Whenever there is this onslaught of back-to-back traumas that is impacting Black and brown people, I always anticipate and can almost predict that it was going to become something like it is today, where there was this, a huge uptick in violence on the streets. I mean, when you look at the coronavirus that hit the country, hit the city and the state, and then you look how it had an impact on Black and brown neighborhoods, combined with the George Floyd, and the police, violence protest that has been ongoing historically in terms of this justice. And then you look at what is basically taking place with gun violence. These are, with people, these things are just, traumas stacked on top of traumas.
Absolutely. I can honestly say that seeing everything that went on and seeing all the shootings and the violence was definitely traumatizing. We not only saw this here in New York City, but this is something that's happening nationwide. Again, I'm going to give you these numbers. The NYPD is reporting that there was a 130% increase in shootings in June compared to June 2019. Can you what are your thoughts on that, and what is the root of this? Why do you think this is happening?
Well, the root of the violence has always been the poverty that exists in communities of color across the country. With the unemployment rate as high as it is, the unemployment rate, when you talk about the lack of the resources that are going into communities that really desperately need resources. Unfortunately, Josh, and especially with the summer months approaching and being upon us, it's always going to be this sort of issue. We're going to see this year in and year out. Maybe not as bad as it was last year, but there is really no way of being able to fully predict it because the root causes still exist. Until we attack the root cause of crime, we're going to always see these upticks, especially during the summer months.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there's another conversation going on about the police and how they're enforcing the law. I'm sure you know that Mayor Bill de Blasio in the recent budget defunded the NYPD by nearly $1 billion. And of course, Governor Cuomo also implemented several police reforms. Police officers are saying, I know that the police chief said this week during a press conference that a lot of officers might be afraid to do their job because of what could happen to them. There's issues about using certain tactics that can't be used anymore. A lot of people are, the police are saying, kind of attributing this to a lack of support that they have. What's your response to that?
I think that's just untrue, and it really doesn't make a lot of sense. If you look at their budget, it was in almost the amount of $6 billion. That is just extremely too much money to go into a police budget because the police, really, I've seen them out in my neighborhoods in East New York. It's almost like the police has nothing else to spend the money on. They're looking, they're going shopping and they have like this unlimited amount of money. Meanwhile, if you was to really look at the spending of the police department and where we can save money and put it towards more effective tools that can help us keep communities safe, it makes a lot of sense. And what I mean by that is, when you talk about the police department's budget and the funding of it, it's just a matter of reappropriating money into where most of the calls that come into 911 are non-emergency calls. So there's really no need for the police to go and enforce anything to do with things like social distancing. We don't need the police to go in a lot of cases enforce things that has to do with noise complaints. You figure there's a lot of unnecessary use of police. And so if you look at it from that perspective and you really look at shaving it down, cutting it by $1 billion is really being nice, but it's still not enough. I mean, right now they have more money than they need to continue to do what they need to do to keep the city safe in their eyes. Being able to reappropriate that money into community organizations and the works that other alternatives to policing models that exist, youth programs that exist. I mean, it makes more sense. It's a wise decision.
And I do want to get into a little more detail about, the $1 billion that was cut, and that money is being diverted to youth organizations, to community organizations to cut violence and to support young people in our community. You're actually one of those organizations, nonprofit organizations in our community who's out there doing the work. I asked you this. I'll reiterate it again. I said this at the top of the show, is that you were actually on the show Memorial Day weekend of last year to talk about this very issue, and you did discuss with me some things that you could use to better do your work in the community for Man Up Inc. And I just want you to talk a little bit about that again. You know, when we're talking about diverting money to organizations and the things that support the community, you would be one of the beneficiaries of that. What are things that you need in order to do your work?
Well, we first and foremost would be one of the few black nonprofit organizations that is committed to doing this work. There's not a lot of black nonprofit organizations that exist in the city. And so a lot of the money, like you said, that are going to be going into these areas are going to go into nonprofit organizations, and they're going to be going into nonprofit organizations who oftentimes have the disconnect, too, with their boots on the ground in communities of color. We are one of the few that still are able to survive and be around today to be able to continue the work that we've been doing since 2004. What we do now is very clear. We set up ourselves in communities like East New York and Brownsville and Bedford-Stuyvesant, and we plant, offices in there that are like beacons of hope and satellite service centers, so to speak. We do everything from working with the children in the community, which is where we target first at Man Up Inc. We go at the children as young as 5-year-olds, and we work with the community to help create safe space for them. We run community centers that we have, like the Prince Joshua Evito Community Center in New York, where we provide all of the different types of activities that young people and the community, not just young people, but community enjoys to take advantage of. We focus on the problem areas of communities, i.e. those areas where their crime is most prevalent. We work with the individuals who are more likely to be shot and probably, would be considered the shooters. And we work with them before they commit a vicious act of crime. And we work with them to try to find out what needs they have. What are the resources that we can prioritize that they can receive so that their needs are met in exchange for a peace treaty where we don't get them to engage in the life of crime or violence against community. We work with the elders of the community as well, with the adults. We work with the people who are looking for employment. We help get them ready, through vocational certification courses and classes. We help them go back to school and maybe look at an opportunity to earn their GED or, to go into some sort of trade. We help get them referred to jobs. We like to make sure that people are ready for the jobs that they said that they wanted to and careers that they want to have in life. And ultimately, we work with our seniors. We also had to make sure that there is a respect of our elders. We have what is called Respect Your Elders initiative at Man Up Inc., where it's an intergenerational sort of initiative. We take the young people and we put them in the same room with the elders, and we take the elders and we put them in the same room with the young people, and we make sure that there's a bridge that is built, that is never blown up, and that they get to understand that it's important that we respect our elders. They are our matriarchs and our patriarchs of our generation and of our kind. And we have to preserve and make sure that their needs are met as well. So we do a plethora of different things at Man Up Inc. And if the city looks to use some of the money that comes away from the police budget to go to fuel these sort of things in other neighborhoods throughout the city, it will make a tremendous difference. It will bring about a drop in crime because now people's needs are being met.
And those are some great things, especially with the education and the jobs that are so desperately needed in many of our communities and neighborhoods. I want to go back just a little bit. You and I had a conversation this week for the story that we had that you can, if you want to see it, is on AmsterdamNews.com for everyone that's listening. And I asked you a question about the guns and how they're getting into the community. And you said that there needs to be a lot more focus on the federal level and on the state level to stop the influx of these illegal guns into neighborhoods of color. Take us through that process of how these guns are getting into our community, because I don't think people really understand and realize that we're not the ones making the guns. We're not the ones bringing them in. We don't have gun factories in our neighborhoods. We can't make
underground black market.
Yeah,
absolutely. There is such thing as an iron. There is such a thing as an iron, pipeline. Where there's data on this. There's proof that guns that are being used in crimes in New York City are guns that were purchased in different states along the I-95 and in other cities where gun laws are less, stronger or less restricted. And those weapons are being transported into the city of New York, into neighborhoods throughout the city, like the South Bronx and the Central Harlems and the South Jamaicas and the Central Brooklyns and the Staten Islands. These guns are not manufactured in the neighborhood. It is unfortunate that the accessibility of illegal weaponry in our communities is still easier to get your hands on than it is to get a decent wage job. Young people have more access to illegal guns than they do legal opportunities. And that's a problem. We need to use the police. If we talk about those that are more important use of our police, they should be focusing on the borderlines, investigating how these weapons are making their way into our communities. The gun laws have to be much tighter, of course, on the federal and state. And I think we in New York have the toughest gun laws in place throughout the nation. But we need to make sure that the enforcement is being also focused on, that they are paying more attention to this underground black market where these guns and drugs and illegal, fireworks are making their way into our communities, into the hands of young people who really truly do not understand how to use these weapons, nor the consequences of use of these weapons. And that's where we want to be able to focus on, and that is the supply column. We need to put more emphasis on the supply versus the demand, because once we can cut off the supply of these guns making their way into our communities, we can assure ourselves that we will be able to, again, to reduce the violence that we see being played out.
And you're saying that these guns are coming from states that are in places where the guns are lax. Obviously, these are coming by car. Am I correct? These are coming by
They're
vehicle?
coming in, possibly. I don't know.
Okay.
I assume so, but I would think that they come in possibly by some sort of truckload, I think.
Oh, okay.
Josh. I think they might be coming in through boatloads.
Okay.
They may be coming in through off the piers and the harbors of our city.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know their routes, but I know that they are making their way into our city illegally, and then eventually they're being sold to people on the community level, again, underground. And it's being sold and then it's being used. These guns are not manufactured here in the city of New York.
Okay.
We don't manufacture these guns. These guns are made elsewhere, sold elsewhere legally to someone, and then eventually they make their way into the hands of a criminal who uses it against his own. And it is unfortunate because it should be a trace that goes over. When we talk about contact tracing,
right,
we should be talking about contact tracing when it relates to illegal guns in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you firsthand, I've lived in states around this country where it is so easy to get a gun, and I can kind of see how it could make its way here because I've like I said, I've lived in Oklahoma, I lived in Alabama.
Yes.
And I've been to Texas,
Indiana,
absolutely.
These places are coming in from over from the Midwest. Is coming its way up from Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia. And it's a big market. It's billions of dollars. I understand that is made illegally in this trade, and I think it's purposefully. I think it's done because this is an easier way. If you want to take out a certain segment of people, this is a sure-in. You could get these guns and you could get it in the hands of the people in their neighborhoods who just really act like they have a demand for it. Then eventually it's going to be used against each other, and that's a win-win for those people who plot to take us all out of off this planet.
I totally agree with that. And I do believe that when you mix that with the lack of resources and things in our communities, it just creates an intentional recipe for disaster. So I completely agree with that. Yeah. We've had so much happen this year in 2020. First, we had COVID-19. Then we had George Floyd. We had the demonstrations and the protests going on, coupled with the fact that there's no summer youth jobs here in New York City this year that are being given by the city. Again, more things that are kind of, leading up to a lot of this violence erupting, or it has erupted. Talk tell us about some of your work in the community that you're currently doing right now. I also want you to talk about your work with the COVID-19 pandemic, because I know in the Amsterdam News we did a story on you about the PPE that you gave out, and I definitely want you to talk about that.
Well, like I said, our type of nonprofits, grassroots-based nonprofits that are Black and brown owned and operated, are key in these days and time. We're on the ground. We're in the heart of the matter. We're in the eye of the storms. So it makes all the sense to make sure that agencies like ours are provided with the meaningful resources and supplies that's needed to get to the people who are going to be more impacted by this virus than anyone else. As you know, this coronavirus has had more of a devastating effect on the Black community, right? Because unfortunately, we have the similar ones with the underlying conditions, right? So when you look at it from that perspective, you look at it from an end where we are the ones that are literally are the ones that are closest to the problem. So we are the ones that can be the closest to the solution. And we've been out there every day since Corona came into our attention in the city. And we've been on the first line, not the front line, because what happens when I say first line, people mistaken. I'm saying that prior to the frontline workers, the emergency responders, there are people in the community who are there first, who are dealing with this issue each and every day and night. And then they are the ones that, if we make sure are provided with the proper protection equipment, and we're giving them the resources to disseminate, to make sure that the information is getting to the people, that can make a major difference. And that's something that we have been doing and will continue to do. As part of our mission statement at Man, I think, is to be prepared for emergencies. And so, the work is ongoing. It's intense. It continues to be intensified. But it's something that we signed up for. And we're here for that use. And if people can see value in connecting with agencies like ours, then if people want to give money, this is the better bang for your dollar. You make sure that it's going into the heart of the community soul and making sure that the people who need it most are getting those resources.
And the last thing I do want to ask you about, when we did the story this week about the recent violence in the city, I spoke to Ashley Sharpton, who's with the National Action Network, Al Sharpton's daughter. She is the director of the Youth Huddle. And I asked her a question that I think definitely needed to be asked. And I'm going to get your reaction to this. I asked her how all this is impacting young people, because we've seen some young folks. I'm sure you know about the 17-year-old young man that was shot and killed here in the Bronx, where I'm at. Yeah, not far from where I'm actually at. And that was so devastating. And she told me that, of course, young people are seeing all this and they're being traumatized. This is impacting them in a negative way. And so one of the things that she told me, I asked her, what are young people telling you that they want? And the one thing that she said several things, but the key thing that she said was that young people are looking for help with mental health issues when it relates to gun violence. And I think that's so, out of all the things that young people could want right now, because they're seeing George Floyd, and then on top of that, they're seeing some violence in the neighborhood. And so that's just a recipe for a lot of things that can impact them. And what are your thoughts about that? We obviously do need more mental health services for our youth in the community.
No question about it.
But tell me how this is impacting our young people.
But we don't just need more mental health services. We need unconventional, non-traditional mental health.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And part of what we do in our crisis management system that we built here in the city of New York, which is our response to dealing with violence on a crisis response level, is we have unconventional, non-traditional, unconventional therapy. We have services where we bring in people who are therapists who don't look like therapists, and we train community members on therapeutic sort of ways to be able to help counsel and mentor young people, in particular people in the community. So young people, when they say that they have been over-traumatized with these traumas, they're absolutely correct, and it does have an impact on your person, on your mental, ability, because it's like you don't. A lot of people didn't even have time to breathe during this time. They didn't have enough time to digest or to really understand all of what is happening at once. And when it begins to settle in, a lot of them begin to really lose their mind. We have to have services in place that deals with that, to help young people cope with the loss of a loved one, to help young people cope with the PTSD that they may be having and suffering from. Because a lot of what they've been experiencing is similar to like what young people experience in war zones. Okay? And now that our youth are being the ones that are exposed to this, and we don't want them to think that this is normal. We don't want them to begin to become desensitized to the things that are going on in their neighborhood. So we need means in a way that we taking them out of the norm, taking them out of the community as an example, taking them to basketball games and taking them to baseball games and taking them to various amusement parks. If that be the case, anything to get them outside of their normal environment and to be able to allow them to release. And if we could bring that, around and bridge that around some restorative justice type like circles where we could have them express the things that they're really dealing with on the inside, but in a proper forum, we need more support for these type of services, but it can't be the traditional way that people are used to seeing. Our youth are not okay with people coming into our neighborhoods with white coats and stethoscopes. Okay, that in itself is going to be rejected at the door. But if we use people who can, are willing to go up to our young people in particular, people in our community, and get close to them and be able to build that trust, we could begin to counsel them, the way that they need to be counseled.
All right. And I just want to close by you telling us what's the best way folks can get in touch with you. You're doing a lot of great work in the community, and just please let people know how to contact you and how they can help.
Without question. I always welcome people to go to our website. That's www.manupinc.org or manupinc.org. Or you can call our same phone number we've had for over 15 years at 718-498-2320, and you can certainly call and leave a message and whatever you can. If it's an inspiring message, if it's something that is motivating our men and women that work at the organization, I really truly appreciate. If it's donations, we are a 501c3, so we have the same tax exempt status as the Red Cross and the Salvation Army, the Big Brother, Big Sister organizations. We have the same exact tax exempt status. So your donations go even, I would say, a little bit further if you contribute to grassroots-based organizations that are Black and brown in communities of color. Thank you so much, Josh.
All right. Thank you so much, AT, for coming on the podcast. That concludes this week's podcast. You can pick up the latest edition of the New York Amsterdam News on newsstands and get updates online at amsterdamnews.com. You can also keep up with us on Facebook at NY Amsterdam News and follow us on Twitter at NYAmNews. I'm Cyril Josh Barker. Thanks for listening.
Hi, my name is Eleanor Tatum, and I'm the publisher and editor-in-chief of the New York Amsterdam News. The coronavirus crisis has brought serious distress to local economies and advertising along with them. The New York Amsterdam News has partnered with the Local Media Association during this unprecedented crisis. Help us continue our important work in chronicling the life of Black New Yorkers, and consider making a donation to the COVID-19 Local News Fund today. Go to givebutter.com/Amsterdam News. Again, that is GIVEBUTTER.com/Amsterdam News. Thank you and stay safe.